Welcome to Legends of Humanity, the international history channel, where we explore the lives of extraordinary individuals who changed the course of the world. Today, we journey into the life of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the national hero of Turkey, the founder of the Republic, and an enduring symbol of reform, reason, and independence. From a young officer in the collapsing Ottoman Empire to the commander who reclaimed his nation's freedom, and ultimately the visionary leader who built a modern, secular state, he did not just create a new country. He forged an idea that continues to shape generations. A childhood in Macedonia, the city of Salonika, a jewel nestled on the Aegean coast, was still peacefully slumbering under the pale moonlight of early 1881 when a tiny life uttered its first cries. This was Mustafa, the fourth child of Ali Ruza Effendi, a retired customs official, and Zubayde Hanım, a diligent woman with kind eyes and resolute spirit. Salonika at the time was part of the vast Ottoman Empire, but it was already tinged with the hues of decay, carrying within it the seeds of change that were beginning to sprout. Mustafa's family belonged to the humble middle class. Their life was not opulent, but neither was it severely lacking. Their small house in the Koca Kasımpaşa neighborhood was always filled with warmth and the laughter of children. Mustafa had an older brother who had passed away early and three remaining sisters, Fatma, Makbule, and Natsiye. Makbul was Mustafa's closest sibling. She often roamed the narrow alleys with him, witnessing the multi-ethnic life of Salonika where Muslims, Jews, Greeks, and many other communities coexisted. This very diversity sowed the first seeds in the boy's mind about differences and coexistence. However, family joy was short-lived. When Mustafa was just 7 years old, a great misfortune struck. His beloved father, Ali Riza, unexpectedly passed away. His death left a huge void, not only in the children's hearts, but also a financial burden on Zubayda's shoulders. To make ends meet, she took her children to her brother's farm on the outskirts, where rural life, though arduous, offered some peace and closeness to nature. Mustafa at that time was a slender boy, but his eyes always gleamed with intelligence and incessant curiosity. At the farm, Mustafa was exposed to farm work, but his mind was drawn to books and lessons. Zubayde, a woman of foresight, noticed her son's thirst for knowledge. Despite the hardships, she decided to bring Mustafa back to Salonika so he could continue his education. This was a pivotal decision, opening the door to the future for Mustafa, who would later become a great leader. Back in Salonika, Mustafa was enrolled in the traditional Mahalli Mektebi school, where education was primarily based on the Quran and old religious values. But with his innate independent nature and critical thinking, the boy quickly felt stifled. Mustafa was not a child who easily accepted everything in the old ways. He often questioned, challenging what adults considered obvious. His eagerness to learn, but not by rote memorization, made him stand out. After a short period, Mustafa transferred to the more Western-oriented Rushdiye secondary school, where he had the opportunity to access modern subjects such as mathematics, science, and history. It was here that a small event changed his life forever. A mathematics teacher, recognizing Mustafa's exceptional abilities, added the surname Kemal, meaning perfection or maturity, to his name to distinguish him from another student with the same first name. From then on, Mustafa became known as Mustafa Kemal, the fateful name inextricably linked to his great career later on. Mustafa Kemal's childhood was not just about schooling. He also clearly witnessed the weakening of the Ottoman Empire. Salonika, a multicultural city, was also a place where new ideas from the West seeped in, clashing with old values. Mustafa sensed the instability, the internal decay of an aging empire struggling to survive against the tide of global change. From the depths of his soul, he began to conceive the idea of a transformation, a new path for his nation, though at that time this notion was still very vague and nascent. On late afternoons, as Mustafa Kemal sat watching ships enter and leave the port of Salonika, he didn't just see cargo or sailors. He saw the world outside. He saw the uncertain future of a dying empire. And in that young mind, a dream of an independent, strong, and modern nation began to form, like a silent promise he made to himself amidst the turmoil of the times. His humble yet eventful childhood in Salonika forged a Mustafa Kemal with an iron will, keen intellect, and a burning desire for a brighter future for his homeland. The young cadet and a vision for reform, the dusty streets of Salonika, once the playground of a curious boy, soon became the backdrop for Mustafa Kemal's next pivotal step. Driven by an innate ambition and a subtle rebellion against the traditional paths laid before him, he made a bold choice that would forever alter his destiny. He would join the military. Despite his mother Zubaydah Hanum's initial reluctance, who envisioned a more conventional life for her son, Mustafa's resolve was unwavering. He secretly sat for the entrance exam to the military secondary school in Salonika, passing with flying colors. This decision marked his definitive break from the old world and set him on a trajectory towards a future he would largely define himself. At the military secondary school, and later at the military academy in Istanbul, Mustafa Kemal quickly distinguished himself. He wasn't just a diligent student, he was a brilliant one, possessing an extraordinary aptitude for strategy, tactics, and leadership. His mind, sharp and inquisitive, devoured knowledge beyond the standard curriculum. He delved into philosophy, history, and the works of Enlightenment thinkers, exploring ideas of nationhood, secularism, and progress that were largely foreign to the decaying Ottoman system. While his peers focused solely on military drills, Mustafa Kemal was already grappling with the existential questions facing his homeland. His secular ideas began to crystallize during these formative years. The Ottoman Empire, founded on a fusion of religious and temporal power, was showing cracks. Mustafa Kemal saw clearly that the empire's rigid adherence to religious dogma and its inability to adapt to modern realities were dragging it towards inevitable collapse. He believed that true strength lay not in blind faith or outdated traditions, but in reason, science, and the will of a people united by a common identity rather than by religious affiliation. These were radical thoughts for a young cadet, often shared in hushed tones with a small circle of like-minded friends, as overt expressions of such views could lead to severe consequences. Life in the military academies was rigorous, demanding absolute discipline and obedience. Yet, even within this strict environment, Mustafa Kemal's independent spirit shone through. He was a natural leader, admired by his comrades for his intellect and charisma, and respected by his instructors for his sharp mind and strategic insights. He excelled in every subject, especially military sciences, demonstrating a natural flair for command. His reports consistently praised his diligence, intelligence, and potential. It was evident to many that this young cadet was destined for greatness, though few could have foreseen the revolutionary path he would carve. As he progressed through his training, first graduating from the military academy in 1902 and then the War College in 1905, Mustafa Kemal's vision of a modern, independent nation began to take concrete shape. He devoured news from Europe, understanding the power of national identity and the need for a state built on secular principles, not the outdated framework of a caliphate. He studied the French Revolution, the rise of nationalism, and the failures of empires that refused to evolve. He saw the Ottoman Empire as a sick man of Europe, clinging to a past that offered no solutions for the future. His early service assignments, even before his first combat experiences, deepened his conviction. He observed the inefficiency, corruption, and bureaucratic inertia that plagued the Ottoman military and civil administration. The contrast between the rigid, old-fashioned system and the dynamic, rapidly modernizing world outside was stark. This further fueled his belief that only a radical transformation, a complete overhaul of the state and society, could save his people from oblivion. He dreamt of a republic, a sovereign state where the people, not a sultan or religious authority, held ultimate power. This was a vision born not from abstract philosophy alone, but from the raw observation of a crumbling empire and the urgent need for a new dawn. The young cadet who had once defied his mother to pursue a military career was now quietly nurturing the seeds of a revolution that would redefine a nation, a soldier's rise in the Balkan Wars. Upon graduating from the War College, Mustafa Kemal was commissioned as a staff captain and began his active military career, which would soon plunge him into the turbulent currents of a crumbling empire. His early assignments, often in Syria, exposed him to the practical realities of Ottoman rule: inefficient administration, widespread discontent, and the growing separatist sentiments among various ethnic groups. While serving in Damascus, he secretly joined the Vatan, Homeland, and Hurriyet Liberty Society, a clandestine revolutionary organization advocating for reform and modernization within the Ottoman system. This covert involvement underscored his burgeoning belief that only radical change could save the empire. The political landscape of the early 20th century was a powder keg, and Mustafa Kemal found himself at its volatile heart. In 1908, he played a subtle but significant role in the Young Turk Revolution, which aimed to restore constitutional rule and bring about much-needed reforms. Although he preferred to remain outside the direct political machinations of the Committee of Union and Progress, CUP, the dominant force behind the revolution, he firmly believed in the principles of liberty and progress they espoused. His experiences during this period reinforced his conviction that the empire's survival depended on its ability to embrace modern, secular governance. His first significant combat experience came during the Italo-Turkish War, 1911-1912, when Italy invaded Ottoman Libya. Despite the overwhelming odds and the empire's logistical challenges, Mustafa Kemal volunteered for service in the region. Disguising himself as a journalist, he traveled to Derna and Tobruk to organize local resistance against the Italian invaders. His leadership, resourcefulness, and ability to rally disparate tribal forces were remarkable. He orchestrated successful guerrilla campaigns, inflicting considerable damage on the numerically superior Italian forces. This campaign showcased his tactical brilliance and his capacity to inspire and lead under adverse conditions, earning him the respect of his superiors and the admiration of his men. Hardly had the dust settled in Libya when the Balkan Wars erupted, 1912-1913, a devastating conflict that would further expose the Ottoman Empire's severe weaknesses. The Balkan League, comprising Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro, launched a coordinated attack, seeking to seize the remaining Ottoman territories in Europe. Mustafa Kemal was swiftly transferred to the front lines, fighting to defend the empire's European heartland. He participated in the desperate defense of Adrianople, Edirne, and later played a crucial role in the recapture of Dimitoka and Edirne, demonstrating his unwavering resolve and strategic acumen. These wars were a brutal crucible for Mustafa Kemal. He witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of the empire's military and political decay. The Ottoman army, once a formidable force, was plagued by outdated equipment, poor training, and internal divisions. The leadership, often swayed by political intrigue rather than military merit, made grave errors. Mustafa Kemal observed the devastating defeats, the loss of vast territories, and the suffering of the Muslim population displaced from their ancestral homes. He grew increasingly aware of the rot within the empire's leadership, convinced that the existing system was utterly incapable of defending its people or adapting to the modern world. Yet, amidst the chaos and despair, Mustafa Kemal's reputation as a capable officer soared. His courage under fire, his cool head in a crisis, and his innovative tactical approaches set him apart. He was promoted and recognized for his exceptional contributions, even as the empire suffered humiliating losses. His fame began to spread not just within military circles, but also among the public, who desperately sought heroes in a time of national decline. The Balkan Wars, though a tragedy for the Ottoman Empire, served as an invaluable training ground for Mustafa Kemal, solidifying his military expertise and deepening his conviction that a radical departure from the past was not just desirable, but absolutely essential for the survival of his people. He emerged from the crucible of these wars not merely as a soldier, but as a potential savior, tempered by fire and clearer than ever about the monumental task ahead. Gallipoli, the birth of a national heroes. The world hurtled towards the abyss of World War I. The Ottoman Empire found itself inextricably drawn into the conflict, aligning with the Central Powers. While political leaders in Istanbul made grand pronouncements, Mustafa Kemal, now a lieutenant colonel, watched with a discerning eye. He understood the profound risks of engaging in such a colossal war, particularly for an empire already weakened by internal strife and external pressures. His experience in the Balkan Wars had solidified his belief that the empire's military command was often mired in incompetence, and his skepticism about the Ottoman war effort ran deep. In early 1915, the Allied powers, primarily Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand, launched a daring campaign to seize the Dardanelles Strait and capture Istanbul, aiming to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war and open a supply route to Russia. This audacious offensive culminated in the Gallipoli campaign, a monumental clash that would define not only the course of the war in the region, but also the destiny of Mustafa Kemal and the future Turkish nation. Mustafa Kemal was assigned to the 19th Division, tasked with defending the Araburnu and Zatkov sector of the Gallipoli Peninsula. It was here, amidst the rugged terrain and fierce Allied assaults, that he would etch his name into the annals of history. On April 25, 1915, as Allied forces landed, the Ottoman lines were on the brink of collapse. In a moment of critical decision-making, without direct orders and acting on his own initiative, Mustafa Kemal diverted his troops to meet the immediate threat. He famously rallied a retreating battalion with the legendary command, "I don't order you to fight, I order you to die. In the time which passes until we die, other troops and commanders can come and take our places." This audacious move, born of tactical brilliance and sheer courage, bought precious time and allowed the Ottoman defenses to solidify. Throughout the ensuing months of brutal trench warfare, Mustafa Kemal consistently displayed exceptional leadership. He seemed to possess an almost uncanny ability to anticipate enemy movements, often positioning his troops to counter Allied offensives before they fully materialized. His calm demeanor under intense fire, his strategic foresight, and his unwavering presence on the front lines inspired his soldiers, who fought with desperate bravery against a technologically superior foe. The battles at Chunuk Bair, Kongbayiri, and the Sari Bair Ridge became synonymous with his name. Under his command, the Ottoman forces held their ground against wave after wave of assaults, inflicting heavy casualties on the Allied forces. The campaign was a brutal stalemate, marked by immense loss of life on both sides. Ultimately, after 9 months of relentless fighting, the Allied forces were forced to withdraw in January 1916, admitting defeat. It was a resounding victory for the Ottoman Empire, a moment of rare triumph in an otherwise bleak period. Gallipoli transformed Mustafa Kemal into a national hero. His fame spread across the empire. He was hailed as the savior of Istanbul and the father of the nation's defense. The Ottoman public, desperate for a symbol of strength and hope, embraced him wholeheartedly. He was promoted to colonel, then general, and decorated for his extraordinary service. Yet, even as he basked in the glow of this monumental victory, his internal conviction about the future of his homeland remained unshaken. Beneath the surface of this celebrated military success, Mustafa Kemal was already dreaming of a radically different future for his homeland. He had witnessed firsthand the immense sacrifice of his soldiers, men fighting with unyielding spirit for an empire that he increasingly believed was beyond salvation. He saw that the victory at Gallipoli, while heroic, was merely a temporary reprieve for a dying system. His experiences on the battlefield, the insights gained from direct command, and his deep understanding of global power dynamics only strengthened his belief that a new, independent, and modern state, free from the shackles of religious dogma and monarchical rule, was the only viable path forward. The glory of Gallipoli solidified his public standing, but it also sharpened his private resolve to usher in a revolution that would transform a crumbling empire into a vibrant, secular republic. Empire in collapse. A leader emerges from the ruins. The victory at Gallipoli, while a beacon of hope, proved to be a solitary triumph in the broader catastrophe of World War I for the Ottoman Empire. As the war dragged on, the empire, already exhausted and outdated, crumbled under the weight of attrition and internal dissent. By late 1918, the Central Powers were defeated, and the Ottoman Empire, their ally, faced a grim reckoning. The Mudros Armistice, signed on October 30, 1918, effectively marked the end of the empire's military resistance and signaled its comprehensive defeat. The terms were harsh, granting the Allied powers extensive rights to occupy strategic points and control communications. The aftermath was devastating. Istanbul, the ancient capital, the very heart of the empire, was occupied by Allied forces. British, French, and Italian troops paraded through its historic streets, a humiliating symbol of a once mighty power brought to its knees. Sultan Mehmed VI, the last Ottoman ruler, found himself a puppet in the hands of the occupiers, his authority a mere shadow of its former glory. The grand palaces and hallowed mosques of Istanbul witnessed the slow, agonizing demise of a 6th-century-old dynasty. Adding insult to injury, the Treaty of Severus, signed in August 1920, sealed the empire's fate. This treaty was a death warrant, carving up the Ottoman territories into spheres of influence for the Allied powers. Anatolia, the very heartland of the Turkish people, was partitioned. Greek forces landed in Izmir, advancing into western Anatolia with the backing of the Allies, dreaming of a greater Greece. Armenia was to be granted independence, and Kurdistan was also envisioned as an autonomous region. The treaty effectively relegated the Turkish people to a small, landlocked region, stripped of their sovereignty and dignity. The nation was dismembered, its future seemingly decided by foreign powers. Mustafa Kemal, who had distinguished himself on multiple fronts during the war, witnessed this humiliation with seething anger and profound sorrow. He had spent his life serving the empire, but now saw it being dismantled from within and without. Unlike the compliant Sultan and his government in Istanbul, who sought accommodation with the Allied powers, Mustafa Kemal rejected the surrender outright. He believed that accepting the terms of the armistice and the treaty would be an act of national suicide. For him, the survival of the Turkish people, their honor, and their very existence depended on a resolute refusal to capitulate. He realized that resistance could not be organized from Istanbul, which was under foreign occupation and whose government was compromised. The capital, once a symbol of power, had become a cage. Mustafa Kemal knew that the real struggle had to begin elsewhere, rooted among the Anatolian people, who bore the brunt of occupation and partition. In a strategic move, he accepted an appointment as inspector of the 9th Army troops, a position that gave him a legitimate reason to travel into the interior of Anatolia. In May 1919, secretly, he left the capital for Anatolia, embarking on a journey that would change the course of history. His departure from Istanbul was not merely a physical relocation. It was a symbolic break from the old regime and its failed policies. He arrived in Samsun on the Black Sea coast, a pivotal moment marking the beginning of the Turkish War of Independence. From there, he traveled through Anatolia, addressing local assemblies, meeting with provincial leaders, and rallying the disheartened populace. He painted a clear, stark picture. The nation was in peril, its very existence threatened, and only a united national struggle could save it. He began preparing for a new national resistance, laying the groundwork for a movement that would defy the odds. His charisma, his reputation as the hero of Gallipoli, and his unwavering belief in the Turkish people resonated deeply. He organized congresses in Erzurum and Sivas, gathering delegates from across Anatolia, laying the political and military foundations for the struggle ahead. These gatherings were crucial in forging a unified front, establishing a national resolve, and setting the stage for the creation of a new, independent Turkish state. From the ashes of a fallen empire, a resolute leader, guided by an unyielding vision, was indeed emerging to forge a new destiny. National struggle, the flag rises in Ankara, with the Ottoman government in Istanbul rendered ineffective and subservient to the Allied occupation. Mustafa Kemal's journey into Anatolia became the ignition point for a nationwide resistance. He traversed the rugged terrain from Samsun to Amasya, then to Erzurum and Sivas, rallying the disaffected Turkish populace. His message was clear and potent. The nation's existence was at stake, and only through unified, unyielding resistance could they reclaim their sovereignty. This wasn't merely about defending a dying empire, it was about forging a new, independent nation. The initial congresses in Erzurum, July-August 1919, and Sivas, September 1919, were pivotal. These gatherings brought together delegates from across Anatolia, laying the political and ideological groundwork for the resistance. Crucially, they articulated the principle of national sovereignty and rejected any foreign mandates or partitions of Turkish lands. Mustafa Kemal masterfully navigated the complexities of regional interests and personal rivalries, uniting diverse factions under a common banner. He understood that legitimacy was paramount, and these congresses provided the democratic facade needed to challenge the authority of the Istanbul government. As the movement gained traction, It became evident that a new center of power was required, one free from the watchful eyes and direct influence of the Allied occupiers. Mustafa Kemal chose Ankara, a relatively small and underdeveloped town in the heart of Anatolia, as the provisional capital. Its strategic location, far from the coast and accessible by rail, made it an ideal base for organizing a prolonged resistance. In December 1919, he arrived in Ankara, where he was greeted with fervent enthusiasm by the local populace, who saw in him the embodiment of their hopes for freedom. On April 23, 1920, a momentous day, the Grand National Assembly, GNA, was inaugurated in Ankara. This marked a profound rupture with the past. The GNA declared itself the legitimate government of Turkey, representing the will of the people, effectively challenging the authority of the Sultan's government in Istanbul. Mustafa Kemal was elected as its first president. The establishment of the GNA was a revolutionary act, a deliberate assertion of national will against imperial authority and foreign occupation. It laid the democratic foundations for the future republic, even as the war for independence raged. With the political framework in place, Mustafa Kemal launched a full-scale war of independence. The primary and most immediate threat came from the Greek forces that had landed in Izmir in May 1919 and were rapidly advancing into western Anatolia. The Greeks, emboldened by Allied support and their own expansionist ambitions, aimed to seize significant swathes of Turkish territory. Mustafa Kemal, as the commander-in-chief of the newly formed Turkish National Army, faced a daunting task. His forces were under-equipped, often outnumbered, and still in the nascent stages of organization. Yet, under his inspired command, the Turkish national movement gained momentum. He meticulously planned and executed defensive and offensive operations. The first and second battles of İnönü, January and March 1921, saw the newly organized Turkish army repel Greek advances, boosting morale and solidifying their resolve. These victories, though hard-fought, proved that the Turkish forces, despite their limitations, could stand against well-equipped adversaries. The turning point came with the Battle of Sakarya, August-September 1921, a brutal 22-day engagement where Mustafa Kemal personally directed the defense. His famous order, "There is no line of defense, there is a surface of defense. That surface is the whole country. Before leaving an inch of it, fight and die," epitomized his determination. The Turkish forces, fighting fiercely, halted the Greek offensive, inflicting a decisive defeat. This victory not only saved Ankara from capture, but also marked the strategic initiative shifting to the Turks. Following Sakarya, the Great Offensive, August 1922, saw the Turkish army launch a final, overwhelming assault against the Greek forces. Within weeks, the Greek army was routed, their lines collapsing, and they were driven out of Anatolia. The reoccupation of Izmir in September 1922, a city previously seen as irrevocably lost, was a symbolic and emotional triumph, reclaiming lands and hope alike. The flag of the new Turkish nation, born from the crucible of war and guided by the unwavering vision of Mustafa Kemal, now flew proudly over a liberated homeland. The stage was set for the official birth of a republic, free and sovereign. The republic is born, a new nation emerges with. The decisive victories in the War of Independence, particularly the routing of Greek forces from Anatolia, the military phase of the national struggle largely concluded. However, the political destiny of the newly liberated lands remained undefined. The Sultanate still existed in Istanbul, albeit as a shadow of its former self, a vestige of the crumbling Ottoman Empire. Mustafa Kemal, now a revered military leader, understood that true independence required more than just expelling foreign armies. It demanded a complete transformation of the state itself, a fundamental break from the imperial past. The first crucial step in this transformation was the abolition of the Sultanate. On November 1, 1922, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, under Mustafa Kemal's resolute leadership, passed a law formally abolishing the Sultanate. This historic act severed the last remaining ties to the Ottoman dynasty, declaring that the rule of the Ottoman sultans had ceased to exist the moment Istanbul was occupied by the Allies in 1920. Sultan Mehmed VI, stripped of all power, was forced to leave Istanbul shortly thereafter, marking the definitive end of an imperial reign that had spanned 6 centuries. This move was revolutionary, dismantling a system deeply entrenched in the nation's history and religious identity. With the Sultanate gone, the path was clear for the creation of a new, modern state. The peace negotiations culminated in the Treaty of Lausanne, signed in July 1923. This treaty, a triumph of the Turkish national movement's diplomatic efforts, recognized the full sovereignty of Turkey within its defined borders, abrogating the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Sevres. It affirmed Turkey's independence on the international stage, a hard-won victory achieved through sheer will and sacrifice. This recognition paved the way for the formal declaration of a new form of government. On October 29, 1923, the Republic of Turkey was officially proclaimed. This date became the birth of a new nation, a moment of profound significance. The Grand National Assembly unanimously adopted the resolution declaring Turkey a republic, fundamentally shifting the country from a monarchical, religiously based empire to a modern, secular state. The old symbols of imperial power were replaced by the ideals of popular sovereignty and national will. The red flag with the white star and crescent, a symbol deeply ingrained in Turkish culture, now proudly flew as the emblem of the republic. Following the proclamation, Mustafa Kemal became its first president. This was not merely a ceremonial title. He was the architect of the republic, the driving force behind its creation, and the undisputed leader who would guide its nascent steps. His election as president by the Grand National Assembly solidified his position as the nation's helmsman, entrusted with the colossal task of not only defending the newly won independence, but also building a modern society from the ground up. Yet, founding the republic was only the beginning. The real revolution would happen in the hearts and minds of the people. Mustafa Kemal knew that simply changing the form of government was insufficient. For the republic to truly flourish and endure, the deeply ingrained conservative traditions, religious dogma, and societal structures inherited from the Ottoman era had to be fundamentally transformed. The challenge was immense: to modernize a largely agrarian society, to foster a new national identity rooted in republican ideals rather than religious affiliation, and to instill a sense of citizenship and shared destiny among a diverse population. His vision extended far beyond political boundaries. He envisioned a cultural and social revolution. He understood that without a radical shift in mindset, the new republic would be fragile, vulnerable to the same forces that had brought down the empire. This meant reforming education, legal systems, social customs, and even the very language. The path ahead was arduous, fraught with resistance and skepticism, but Mustafa Kemal was unyielding in his belief that the Turkish people, given the right direction and guidance, could rise to meet the challenges of the modern world. The republic was born, but its soul was yet to be forged. Sweeping reforms, winds of change across Anatolia. With the republic firmly established, Mustafa Kemal, now known as Ataturk, father of the Turks, a surname granted to him by the Grand National Assembly in 1934, wasted no time. He understood that political independence was merely the first step. To secure the nation's future, a radical transformation of Turkish society, culture, and institutions was imperative. He embarked on an ambitious program of reforms, known as the Ataturk reforms or Kemalist reforms, designed to drag Turkey from its medieval slumber into the modern age, often with relentless determination and against significant opposition. One of the most foundational reforms was the separation of religion from state, a principle known as secularism, laïcism. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been a theocracy, with Islamic law, Sharia, governing all aspects of life. Ataturk systematically dismantled this system. In 1924, the Caliphate, the supreme religious authority of Sunni Islam, was abolished, a move that sent shockwaves across the Muslim world. Religious courts were replaced by a secular legal system, and religious schools were placed under state control. The Ministry of Religious Affairs and Pious Foundations was established to manage religious affairs under state supervision, effectively removing religious institutions from direct political power. This was a bold and controversial step, aiming to replace religious fealty with national loyalty as the primary bond of citizenship. Simultaneously, Ataturk initiated a profound overhaul of the legal system. The old Ottoman codes, based on Islamic law and various local customs, were replaced with modern, secular laws inspired by European models. The Swiss Civil Code, the German Commercial Code, and the Italian Penal Code were adapted and adopted, bringing Turkey in line with Western legal practices. This meant radical changes in areas like family law, inheritance, and contracts, ensuring legal equality for all citizens, regardless of their religious background. Perhaps one of the most visible and impactful changes was the replacement of Arabic script with Latin script in 1928. For centuries, Turkish had been written using a modified Arabic alphabet, which was complex and difficult to learn, contributing to high rates of illiteracy. Ataturk recognized that literacy was key to modernization and accessibility. He launched a nationwide campaign to teach the new alphabet, personally touring the country with a blackboard demonstrating the new letters. This reform, while initially met with resistance, dramatically boosted literacy rates and opened Turkish society to Western knowledge and literature. Ataturk was also a staunch advocate for empowering women. Under the old system, women had limited rights and were often confined to traditional roles. Ataturk's reforms aimed to bring about full gender equality. Polygamy was outlawed, civil marriage and divorce were introduced, and women were granted equal rights in inheritance, education, and employment. In 1934, Turkish women gained the right to vote and hold public office, long before many Western democracies. These reforms shattered centuries of patriarchal norms and laid the groundwork for women's active participation in public life. Education underwent a radical transformation as well. The traditional religious schools were closed, and a unified, secular, and co-educational national education system was established. The curriculum was modernized, emphasizing science, mathematics, and critical thinking over rote memorization of religious texts. Universities were reformed and expanded, aiming to produce a new generation of educated citizens capable of leading the modernized nation. Beyond these structural changes, Ataturk also pushed for social and cultural reforms. The fez, a traditional Ottoman headwear, was abolished in favor of Western-style hats, symbolizing a break from the past and an embrace of modern identity. Surnames were introduced in 1934, replacing the old system of titles and honorifics, with Ataturk himself adopting the surname Ataturk. The Gregorian calendar replaced the Islamic calendar, and the international system of weights and measures was adopted. These sweeping reforms were not merely cosmetic, they were a deliberate, systematic effort to dismantle the old Ottoman order and push Turkey from the medieval to the modern age. Ataturk's vision was clear: a secular, democratic, and nationally conscious republic, aligned with the principles of Western civilization. He pursued these changes with relentless determination, often overcoming significant societal inertia and traditionalist resistance, forging a new identity for a nation reborn. Resistance and resolve. Tested by fire, Ataturk's sweeping reforms, though visionary and essential for modernizing Turkey, were not universally embraced. They represented a radical departure from centuries of tradition, deeply challenging deeply ingrained religious and social norms. Consequently, his ambitious program was met with significant resistance from various quarters, becoming a true test of his resolve and the nascent republic's stability. The most formidable opposition came from religious fundamentalists and conservative elements of society. For generations, religion had been the bedrock of Ottoman identity, and the abolition of the caliphate, the closure of religious courts, and the secularization of education were seen by many as direct attacks on Islam itself. Preachers and local religious leaders whose authority and influence were diminished by the reforms often stirred discontent among the populace, particularly in rural areas where traditional values held stronger sway. There were instances of local uprisings and protests against the new secular laws, requiring firm intervention by the state to maintain order. Beyond religious opposition, royalists and former Ottoman loyalists also plotted against him. These individuals, clinging to the hope of restoring the Sultanate, or at least the old imperial order, viewed Ataturk as a usurper and a destroyer of their heritage. They often sought to exploit any dissatisfaction with the new government or its reforms to undermine his authority. Their activities, though largely clandestine, posed a constant threat to the political stability of the young republic. Political opponents within the Grand National Assembly and among former associates also challenged Ataturk. While the War of Independence had forged a united front, the peace brought divergent views on the direction of the new state. Some argued for a less radical pace of reform, others for greater personal liberties, and a few even for a return to some form of traditional governance. Ataturk, with his authoritarian leadership style, did not tolerate dissent easily, often sidelining or isolating those who opposed his vision. This led to periods of political tension and occasional purges within the ruling Republican People's Party. The intensity of the opposition sometimes escalated to direct threats. There were multiple assassination attempts against Ataturk, the most notable being the Izmir assassination plot in 1926. A group of former CUP members and disgruntled individuals conspired to kill him during a visit to Izmir. The plot was uncovered, and the conspirators were arrested and tried, leading to widespread arrests and executions. This event, while a stark reminder of the dangers he faced, only strengthened Ataturk's resolve to push forward with his reforms, viewing such plots as confirmation of the need to decisively break with the old order. Despite assassination attempts and political unrest, Ataturk held firm. His conviction in the necessity of a secular, progressive nation was unshakable. He believed that compromise on the fundamental principles of the Republic would doom Turkey to repeat the mistakes of the past. He used a combination of legislative force, public persuasion, and, when necessary, firm suppression of dissent to ensure the reforms were implemented. He traveled extensively, engaging directly with the people, explaining the rationale behind his policies, and appealing to their sense of national pride and a better future. His resilience in the face of such formidable challenges underscored his extraordinary will. Ataturk was not just a military genius, he was a political force, a master of strategy both on the battlefield and in the realm of governance. He recognized that the future of Turkey hinged on its ability to embrace modernity and shed the vestiges of a decaying empire. His unwavering determination, guided by his vision of a secular, progressive nation, allowed him to navigate these turbulent waters, ensuring that the revolutionary changes he initiated took root and transformed the very fabric of Turkish society. The trials of resistance only served to sharpen his focus and solidify his legacy as the uncompromising architect of modern Turkey. The final days, a legacy beyond death. The relentless intensity of nation building, the ceaseless battles on both the battlefield and the political arena, and the sheer force of will required to fundamentally reshape a society inevitably took a severe toll on Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's health. For years, he had driven himself with an almost superhuman energy, overseeing every detail of his grand vision, from military campaigns to educational reforms. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, engaged in intellectual debates, strategic planning, and public engagement. This exhausting pace, coupled with his habits, gradually eroded his robust constitution. In the mid-1930s, signs of his declining health became increasingly apparent. He suffered from cirrhosis of the liver, exacerbated by a lifelong indulgence in alcohol. Despite his doctor's urgent advice for rest and moderation, Ataturk remained committed to his duties, often pushing himself beyond physical limits. He continued to oversee reforms, engage with foreign dignitaries, and make public appearances, demonstrating his unwavering dedication to the young republic he had forged. His physical decline, however, was undeniable, and a somber mood began to settle over the nation as it became clear their beloved leader was fading. The last years of his life were spent largely in his residences in Ankara and Istanbul, though he continued to receive reports and make decisions from his sickbed. He remained keenly aware of international developments, particularly the rising tensions in Europe that would soon lead to another world war. His final public appearances showed a man weakened by illness but still possessing the fiery spirit and sharp intellect that had defined his life. He delivered speeches, held meetings, and continued to champion the principles of his revolution, even as his body betrayed him. In October 1938, his condition rapidly deteriorated. He was transferred to the Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul, a grand Ottoman residence, which had become his final resting place. The nation, collectively holding its breath, followed every update on his health. The Turkish people, who had seen him lead them through the darkest hours of defeat and inspire them to build a new future, braced themselves for the inevitable. The man who had given them a homeland and a modern identity was now battling his last silent war. On November 10, 1938, at 9:05 a.m., Mustafa Kemal Ataturk passed away in Istanbul. The news plunged Turkey into profound mourning. Schools closed, flags flew at half-mast, and millions lined the streets, weeping openly as his coffin was transported. The grief was immense and heartfelt, a testament to the deep love and reverence the Turkish people held for their founder. He was initially laid to rest at the Ethnography Museum of Ankara, and later, in 1953, his remains were ceremoniously transferred to Anıtkabir, a magnificent mausoleum specially built in Ankara to honor his immense contributions. But his legacy endured. He left behind not only a republic, but an idea that a nation, even one seemingly on the brink of extinction, can rise through reason, reform, and relentless will. Ataturk's vision of a secular, democratic, and modern Turkey, founded on the principles of popular sovereignty and national identity, became the bedrock of the Turkish state. His reforms, though challenging at the time, laid the groundwork for Turkey's place in the modern world, empowering its people, modernizing its institutions, and giving it a distinct national character. Beyond the specific reforms, Ataturk left behind a powerful example of leadership, a man who defied convention, challenged the status quo, and dared to dream of a future radically different from his past. His life story is a testament to the transformative power of an individual's conviction and dedication. He taught his nation that true strength lay not in tradition or dogma, but in embracing science, progress, and the collective will of a free people. His spirit, enshrined in the very fabric of the Turkish Republic, continues to inspire, reminding generations that a nation can indeed forge its own destiny, even when faced with the most formidable challenges. You've just heard the remarkable journey of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founding father of modern Turkey, and one of the most influential reformers in modern world history.